So from a course outline for an AP chemistry prep, the idea here is that we want to prepare students to be successful in AP chemistry. In many ways, AP chemistry is the hardest of the AP exams, with the exception of some of the language exams. And that is because it covers an enormous amount of content. AP Physics, which some of you may be familiar with, the original AP Physics course, used to cover the same amount of content, but they split it into 2 courses. So for years, it was recommended that students have a double block to take AP Chemistry, or they take it over 2 years. So AP Chemistry is a tough exam. It's not impossible, and we can help out, but I know some people have some trepidations about it. It's a lot of work. My favorite, since my first love is chemistry, I recommend everybody take AP Chemistry, but I know that a lot of students have some fear and a little anxious about it. So what my approach will be is that, well, first thing we'll do is assess the student knowledge. What do you already know? And then we're going to address gaps. And then I want to make sure that students understand the difference between their honors or pre-AP chemistry course, if they've taken one, and AP chemistry. It is largely the same material, but it is much more in depth and moves much more quickly. So if we look at, for AP chemistry here, our review topics will be fundamental knowledge. How do you measure? What kind of tests do you do? What's uncertainty? Those sorts of things. Laboratory practices and procedures. So folks know, and students, these are the things that an AP chemistry teacher probably expects your student to know. Atomic structure, periodicity, molecular and ionic compounds, intermolecular forces, and chemical reactions. Those are the review topics for AP. These would be the main topics for regular chemistry. There'll be some new topics which we will touch on briefly, simply to position them, because an AP chemistry teacher would not expect your student to know this going in. That's kinetics, thermodynamics, equilibrium, and acid, base, and buffers. All right. The agenda would look something like this. The first week, we would talk about the introduction to the course and the course materials. We would do a pre-test, an initial assessment, talk about fundamental concepts and laboratory practices and procedures. All right. Weeks 2 and 3 would probably be spent atomic structure and periodicity. Week 4, molecular and ionic compounds. 5, intermolecular forces and gas laws. Week 6, chemical reactions. Week 7, we talk about the new topics, the things that they might not have seen in their regular chemistry class. And then week 8, the differences, a final assessment, and we'll talk about some success strategies for the AP chemistry course. Now, what I would like to do, hopefully this will work, I'm going to change the share here, and I want to show you some of the things that your students might see. Should see me now. And so some of the kinds of resources you could anticipate that your students would be able to, kinds of things that we would be looking at. This would be our textbook. It is an online textbook, so there's nothing to buy. This is OpenStax from Rice University. It is free. You can download it. There's an app if your students like using phones or a tablet, but they would be getting references, and they might get some assignments and things from this particular textbook. I found this one very useful, even for students who have regular textbooks in AP chemistry, because it's searchable. And so that helps out quite a bit. We might also do some things like virtual labs. And so in this case, we have a virtual lab where we're trying to determine the concentration of silver nitrate. So we can pull up, add things, and the students would use it. Obviously, it's not quite like a real lab, but they get an opportunity to at least get some feeling for how a lab would work. And you pour things here, and so it allows you to do things like add solutions, just to kind of show you what's going on. All right. Is this visible to folks? Okay. And yeah. You add. Yep.
Yes.
Good. So, you know, and then we would add okay, we'll go to a glassware and you can simulate labs. All right, and I'm just demonstrating a few things. And the students, we would go through this with all the students. Okay, so that's kind of a virtual, you know, we have these virtual labs. So we'll have some labs we can do that way. In addition to that, we have simulations. This happens to be a simulation of molecular structure, which is one of our review topics. So you can take students, we will use things like this. You use things like this to demonstrate to students some of the concepts. And then where we don't have anything else, there would be something like videos where the students would watch the video, write down the data. This would be for lab practice. And we'll have a couple of those where students get an opportunity to do that kind of thing. Okay, so let's go back to my presentation. Are there any questions at this point? No? Okay. So those are the kinds, so that would be what it would look like in terms of, that's my current schedule. Now, remember that I'm doing an assessment. So if every student in the class already knows atomic structure and periodicity, we're not going to spend our time on it. We'll spend our time on something else. If every student in the class has trouble with a particular topic, we might spend more time on it. If students are mixed, we might spend less. It just depends. And that's the purpose of the pre-assessment and the post-assessment. But always want to know where are students, and so that you get the absolute maximum amount of value out of every minute that they give up of their summer vacation. So I know that your students may be very intent, and I always was. I loved going to school. But it is summer vacation, so we want to make sure that it's worth your while and it's worth your students' while. Okay, so if we're talking about regular chemistry, and now this depends on who your students are, right? Are you preparing for AP chemistry? Or are you preparing for honors or pre-AP chemistry? It's going to look very much the same. The materials tend to be exactly the same. The thing, of course, that is different here is that students are not expected to know as much chemistry. So we will look at it the same basic process. We'll do a pre-test and see where things are, and then introduce students to the difference between chemistry and other science courses. Now, that could be biology. Many schools do biology and then chemistry. That could be physics. And so we'll talk about how chemistry is the same and how it's different. So what would our course outline, where would we focus our attention for chemistry? So we've got fundamental knowledge. We've talked a little bit about that. It would be in more detail, measurement and uncertainty, the scientific method, and the math, always fun for students. Laboratory practices and procedures, very important for them not only to be safe, but they're an important part of the process. Coulomb's law and atomic structure, matter and energy. And those would be the major topics. And this, again, we would spend more time on these topics. The same ones are included in AP chemistry, but we don't spend as much time on them because the expectation there is the student is not as familiar. And again, we have about an 8-week schedule there. So I have probably spoken a little too quickly, but I'm going to open this up for questions.